Good evening, everyone, and we're off and ready to go. Please let me introduce our program quality director, none other than Iona Rodrigues, DTN. Iona!
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to District 123's workshop. Tonight, we have our instructor, Bruce Richardson, who will be giving a workshop on implementing hybrid clubs. Our presenter tonight, Bruce, is the owner of Premier Event Support and has helped many clients, corporate, nonprofits, and Toastmasters groups to go online with hybrid meetings. In this workshop, Bruce will share his expertise with you so you can plan and successfully launch a hybrid club. Please welcome our instructor tonight, Bruce Richardson, implementing hybrid clubs. Bruce Richardson.
Thank you, Iona. I am so glad to be here and share this evening with you. I see we've got 19 participants, and that's great. And I appreciate your time and plan on bringing some good value to the next 2 hours. The workshop will be very interactive, so feel free to use the chat or at appropriate points, unmute, and join into the conversation. This is your workshop. I have an agenda with what I want to cover, but outside of that, I'll flow with whatever direction we need to go to so that you can get answers to your questions. The meeting is being recorded, so if your video is on, you may be recorded. Your voice may be recorded. If you don't like that, turn your video off. But we would, if possible, we would love to see you guys. Leave your video on, your lovely faces, everybody's smiling. So if you don't mind, leave your video on. When you do, stay muted, but if you do unmute to ask a question or share, let's keep it to 1 minute. And that way everybody gets a chance. So we don't have an official timer, but the Zoom host will mute you if you run on too long. Just be concise. So if you are sharing, be concise, keep it to 1 minute so that everybody has an opportunity. And like I say, stay muted unless you are talking. It improves the sound quality for the recording and for everybody listening. We all on board? Good. Feel free to take notes, and I will send out a summary by email afterwards, or I'll have Eva or somebody send one out within the next couple of days, and also include links to some of the products and different things that I'll be talking about. My first experience taking a Toastmasters Club hybrid was when I was with Toast to Your Health, which was actually a corporate club with eHealth Ontario. And the challenge that they faced was the company, the organization, was moving from a model where everybody was in the office to a remote work environment 3 days a week. And then, of course, for the club now, that presented a challenge because every Tuesday lunchtime, you've lost over half your people. They're working from home. And we managed to change that to a hybrid model. And this was 2 years before COVID, using some very basic equipment and a very, very, very tight budget and a few donations. We were actually able to take them corporate, and it turned out to be very effective. And now that COVID hit, or once COVID hit, they were all ready to hit the ground running. There was no disruption to their club whatsoever. It's entirely online now, but the hybrid leading to that, everybody was used to it and knew what to expect. So it worked really well. And once they're back in the office, they will go back to a hybrid model. So I've implemented it in a corporate environment and in Toastmasters, a Toastmasters club successfully. And tonight I've, compared to the corporate environment, I have scaled it back to something that's probably more realistic for a Toastmasters club. So that's my background and some of my experience, and I'll be sharing more detail around that as we go through the evening. I guess let's start off. If you want to share what are the challenges or what questions, what things do you hope to walk away with this evening? What are the takeaways that you are looking for? You want to just unmute or share it in the chat? You have a list of equipment used and potential costs. Yes, I do. I will send that out afterwards and give you an idea of what sort of costs are involved.
Bruce?
Yeah, Anton? Yep.
Sure. One of the questions I have is, I've attended a few clubs which have done some type of hybrid. Of the three I've attended, one has only been successful. The other ones have had a lot of challenges and issues. What is the best way to do the hybrid thing? How to setting from a cost perspective? Most of our clubs I work with have got a very limited budget of $100 or $200, and that is it. Can it be done on your method?
Okay, $100, $200, depending on what room they're in and what options they have, that is tight, very tight. With what I'm going to be going through, if a club has a budget of $1,000, that would be ideal. That would be really good. If they can get some donations and bits and pieces, you might get away for $400 or $500, depending on what people are willing to donate, and depending on what equipment is in the room already too. So that might be an issue. And we'll go into more detail on that when we start talking about the actual equipment. Good question, and we'll make sure we cover that. And if there's any holes or gaps at the end of the evening, make sure you bring that back. Be interesting to see the club that worked well versus the ones that failed, how they compare to what we'll be talking about this evening. Are we encouraged to ask our paying members to make donations? That is up to the board, and depending on how much money they have in the bank and how they operate, that is up to your individual club. What size rooms? The model will vary depending on the size of room you're dealing with, but can be adapted accordingly. So we'll talk about that as we go through the evening. I wasn't going to talk about paying members making donations, but my current club that I am with, they are looking at a hybrid model. But what they're going to do is they have some money in the bank from what we saved in rent over the last year. We haven't had to pay rent over the last year, so we've got that money to work with, and they've got that set aside. Okay, and how to adapt individual roles. Yes, we will cover that, Patrick. Good point. And is district support available? I'm not in a position to answer that. The district is supporting you by hosting this conference this evening. This is the first step. Beyond that, that's out of my, that would have to go higher up the food chain than where I sit. Well, what do you mean by hybrid model? Some folks in the meeting room and others connecting by video. That is a good question. And actually, we'll use that to segue into my first point. Okay, tech requirements. Yep, we'll cover that. What is a hybrid model? Hybrid means two things coming together, and it's a combination of in-person and remote people attending the same club meeting at the same time. So we were in person prior to COVID. Now we're entirely online in the middle of COVID. Hybrid is bringing the two together so that both you can have people online and people in the room at the same time. But it does present technical challenges, as Anton made reference to. One club has done it well, other clubs have struggled with it. So it does bring technical challenges, and I can give you some answers, generic answers, but with that information, you will have to then decide what works best for your club. And there might be some trial and error in there. What might be, just go ahead and unmute, what might be some of the advantages of a hybrid club? Thoughts on that?
Accessibility for people with disabilities.
Good, people with disabilities.
And
People
able
from
to
a
attend.
distance.
People who are too far away to drive,
Bad weather.
bad weather, yep. Overseas members, yes, if you've managed to get members from outside that are too far away, international members, yeah, definitely. It opens up lots of opportunities. Also, too, as we reopen, there are still people that need time to, you know, maybe because of health issues or for personal reasons, still are not comfortable in group settings. So it's going to help ease people back in or still keep those people engaged. Whereas if you just went in person only, if they're not ready to come out yet, then you're going to lose them for 6 months, a year, maybe longer. So it keeps it open to members who are maybe still dealing with COVID for whatever reason, personal reason, health reason. Easier to visit other clubs, definitely. I'm sure the area directors and division directors will love that because they can still continue to visit 4 or 5 clubs a week without having to drive all across District 123. It's a great skill as many businesses use the technology for meetings between those not in the same location. Definitely. But what are some of the disadvantages? It sounds great, but what are some of the disadvantages?
The technology might not work.
Technology issues. There is a cost to it. Bandwidth, which means the quality of your internet connection, the capacity of the internet connection, sound issues. Can't see the whole audience. Some folks not tech savvy.
Just the personal connection between people in the same physical room is missing as well.
Yes. So there are disadvantages, and anytime I'm doing hybrid, not just in Toastmasters, but anytime I'm doing a hybrid meeting, you can't fix everything. You can't fix the physical, you know, see you face to face. But in the back of my mind, as I'm planning it out, everything that I'm doing, I'm trying to make it as real as possible for the remote people to feel like they're in the room, and for the people in the room to feel like the remote people are there, as much as is possible with the technology that's available. So that's always in the back of my mind. With everything that I plan out, with everything I do, how can I make it as realistic as possible with the tools, the technology, the tools that I have available to me? And that is my goal. And with proper care, proper planning, we can overcome many of the disadvantages. Will it be the same? No, but it will be as close as possible that we can make it. So that's always in the back of my mind. What are some of the considerations that we have to when we're adopting this model? So I'm not suggesting that you take my laundry list and run out and buy all this stuff next week and say, yep, we're going hybrid, let's do it. This needs to be planned out carefully. The club executive needs to be on board, and even your members need to be on board. So when we are considering it, if you're taking notes, or this recording will be available, or I'll send out a summary afterwards, what you have to consider, what your executive has to consider, and your membership, the technology required, there is equipment required, and the cost of that equipment.
The costs, yes.
So let's suppose you want to put $500 or $1,000 towards it. How many club members will benefit from that? If only one person is going to use it some of the time, is it worth the investment? But if half your club is going to use it, or if you have members outside of the geographic area, too far away, then it probably will be worth it. So ask yourself, how many members will benefit? That's going to be a factor. It was mentioned earlier, you need to check the internet quality at the venue you're using. If the internet will not support video conferencing, then you either need to find a new venue or say we can't do it. I do sometimes do streaming through the cell phone if you've got a good signal, but that's going to take a lot of data. Who's going to pay for that? So ideally, you want a venue that has good internet. There will be a training component every week now. This needs to be set up. Equipment needs to be set up, unless you have exclusive use of the room, unlikely. And since you can't leave that just at one person, you have to have multiple people trained. You need people with the technical skills or who are able and willing to learn that. Because you need to have consistency. If you're only doing it some of the time and you say, oh, Bob isn't here next week, so we're not doing hybrid next week, members aren't going to accept that. You're either all in or not at all. So you have to have multiple people trained. It has to be a role that gets assigned, just like any other role. You have to decide what platform are you going to use. Are you going to use Zoom? Are you going to use Microsoft Teams? I was in a meeting, not a Toastmasters meeting, but a meeting using a Facebook group chat. I would strongly recommend Zoom. I use it with a lot of my corporate clients. You can get a plan for, I believe it's about $15, $18 a month for a paid Zoom plan. And the thing is, most people know Zoom. So your remote users don't have to learn another platform. But whatever platform you decide to use, you will probably have to incorporate that as a monthly cost. And each week there'll be additional time for setup and cleanup. So before you make your first purchase or set up for your first meeting, hybrid meeting, you have to have answers to all of these questions. This is some of the planning you need to do. And if you don't do that, it's going to be a struggle and you're far more likely to fail. As was mentioned earlier, clubs are doing it well, clubs are not doing it well. And if you don't do it well, that's a reflection on the quality of your club. People will come once or twice, and if it's not a good experience, they're not going to be back. You lose guests, you lose members. So take the time to think these things through and do it right. What kind of checklist are we looking at to set up? You'll see that as once we start to get into the technical, and that's where we're heading now, some of the technical aspects. Thoughts, questions, comments on the points that I made for consideration? For Toastmasters, you guys are also quiet. Great comments, though. Great comments in the chat. Zoom also has discount codes. Okay, that's good to know. Anton, for those clubs that didn't do so well, where, if you don't mind me asking, if you know the answer, great. If not, that's fine. But where did they fail in their consideration or their planning? Can you see any aspect there, or what aspects did they have trouble with? Nope. Okay. You guys are also quiet. I must have answered your questions, given you something to think of. You're all pondering this. So with this in mind, how many of you think your club will most likely go hybrid? And how many think that it's just a dream, probably won't happen? Thumbs up if you think your club will probably go hybrid in the next, once you get back your venue back. Cheryl, Colleen, Peggy, Paul. Okay, 6 people gave a thumbs up. And you know what? I would rather have 6 clubs do it well than 20 clubs and half of them make a mess out of it. You're wasting money, you're wasting time, you're damaging your credibility and your reputation. So take those considerations seriously. And if you don't have answers, or if you need to get a techie guy to help you through those questions and those issues, definitely do that. It's very important that you have those issues addressed and thought through prior to any purchases or implementation. Rotating in person and online. That is something your club executive could consider. So 1 week in person, next week online, the way we're doing it, our clubs right now. Sure, that's worth consideration. The thing, and maybe if you don't have internet at the venue, that might be the only option. The thing is, then people have to have in their calendar, oh, do I drive there this week or do I go online this week? So you lose that consistency. People have to keep much closer track. You have to make sure you communicate well with which weeks are online and which weeks are in person. So that might be an option for some clubs. The facility equipment and cost is going to be the main issue. And yeah, definitely. But you're better to go in with your eyes wide open, knowing that, and then saying, yes, we can, or no, we can't. Yeah, Patrick, what about the social challenge of having in-person members and remote members treated differently, both in meetings and outside meetings? In terms of treated differently, in the meeting, it is, with the hybrid clubs that I've seen and implemented, it's minimal. There is a little bit of a difference, but it is minimal, and I'll walk through how we did our meetings. In terms of the social aspect and all the chit chat and everything else, that you know, unless people walk up to the camera and say, hi, Bob, in the Zoom session and, you know, chat back and forth that way, it is harder that way. And that aspect you will not have, or to a much more limited extent. So it's good to know that. With the technology that we have, we're taking advantage of what we can do, but it does have its limits, and you have to walk in with your eyes wide open, knowing that that is a limitation.
Bruce, you did ask for people to speak up. So if you can outline, so you said that you come from a corporate club. So obviously I assume that the cost of the room is not issue for your club. So what other costs were you thinking about as a corporate club? If the room is already provided to you free of charge, I assume, what other costs would you want to plan for?
Yeah, at the corporate club, we were very lucky. There was a projector in the room. So, and we used our work notebook. We used, at that point, it was Microsoft Communicator, the video messaging. So all that was provided through the company. The only thing we had to get was a microphone and a speaker to plug in, and they were donated. So we actually did it with 2 donations and no costs, but of course that's subsidized by the company. In a public venue, if the room has a projector or a TV screen, that's great. If other than that, we'll be talking about equipment. You're basically looking at a notebook computer, a camera, a microphone, and a speaker, and we'll look at some of that equipment. And if some of that can be donated, then that's even better. Save you some money there. I wish there was some easy, simple way to do it. But if you want to keep it effective, I'm trying to scale it to the keep it effective, but still at the lowest cost that we can do it. You could have somebody sit there with their cell phone and stream it from Zoom, but the audio is going to be terrible. The picture is going to not be that good. There's going to be a lot of limitations and issues and problems with that. And as we start to talk about the technology, you'll see where that comes in.
Bruce, isn't one of the concerns to be everybody has to stand in designated spots to be effective in the hybrid meetings, i.e. your speaker spots?
That is something that I am going to recommend when we start talking about the microphone.
Okay.
Depending on the microphone, but really anybody who is presenting should be up at the lectern speaking. Otherwise, you can pick up people in the room. It won't be as loud. So if somebody's just saying a word or two, they don't need to come up. But the people who are speaking, presenting, giving reports, I'm going to recommend that they be standing up at the lectern.
What about the timer position? Because you can't be both speaker and timer.
Okay, for the timer, that is what we did for that. And I was going to cover this a bit later, but since it's brought up, that's a good point now. When we did it, there were two roles that we did not give to remote people. And that was the Toastmaster or chairperson and the timer. Those two roles had to go to somebody who was there in the room. And then what would happen is the timer would have their cards, and if the speaker was in the room, the speaker could see, had line of sight to the timer, could see the timing cards. If the speaker was remote, then the timer had to be somewhere in the room where they could hold the cards in front of the camera for the remote speaker to see them. And that's how we dealt with that.
So a follow-up question, Bruce. So say your speaker was remote, how would the people in the room see that speaker?
Ah, good question. We will be coming to that. Very good question. You're thinking ahead. Excellent. So I will address that. And if I don't address it fully, make sure you ask more questions. So let's move on to the technical. Now we're getting into the nuts and bolts, and the techie people are going to love this part. The people who are not technical, your head's probably going to be spinning. You might have a headache by the end, and you'll just send this video to whoever is technical in your club. So if you don't get it all, don't feel bad. But if you are technical, this is the nuts and bolts now of how we make it all work. So remember, the goal here is to make the remote people feel as if they're in the room, and the people in the room feel as if the remote people were there with them. And that is to the greatest extent possible. Is it going to be exactly the same? No. Are you going to be able to hug and have all those conversations? No. But to the greatest extent possible, that is what we're trying to achieve. So what do we need? Equipment list. You need a wired Ethernet connection or very good Wi-Fi. I can't understate that enough. If you don't have that, it doesn't matter how good everything else is, it will not work well. If I'm doing a corporate deal, I specify right in there, even if it's in a hotel, I want wired internet connection, wired Ethernet connection. One hotel I was at, or one instance, I couldn't get it, and we tested it. Everything was fine using Wi-Fi. And then an hour later, 50 people walk in the room, all connect to the Wi-Fi on their phones, and nothing worked after that. It was terrible. Another hotel I was at, they had a separate we said, we can't give you wired Ethernet, but we can give you our staff Wi-Fi, which is private, not used by guests. And that actually worked pretty well. So I'm not saying you can't use Wi-Fi, but watch the quality of it. There's a site that I use, speedtest.net. Speedtest.net. If you go there, and what I want a reasonable download speed, but what I'm most concerned about is on the upload speed. I'm looking for at least 2.5, or I'm looking ideally for 5 megabits per second upload speed. An absolute minimum, I'd be looking for 2.5 megabits per second upload speed, and probably have some issues. 5 would be ideal. That's the benchmark that I use if I'm going into a venue and checking. So you've got good internet. Next thing you're going to need is you're going to need a computer. Windows, Mac, doesn't matter, but you will need a notebook, I guess portable, so a notebook computer. Not a tablet, not a smartphone, an actual notebook with USB ports. Now, it doesn't have to be the latest best, but it has to be something decent that is capable of running Zoom reasonably well. So maybe somebody in the club has got a new one and has an old one they'll donate. You could pick up a used one probably for $300-400 on eBay, something decent, or new, you'd probably be looking in the $600-700 range if you wanted to buy new. But you need a notebook capable of running Zoom. Now, for the remote people to see what's going and hear what's going on in the room, there's 2 things you're going to need. You're going to need a camera and a microphone. And that's what will allow the remote people to see what is going on inside the room. Let's talk about the camera first. When I did Toast to Your Health, because we didn't have a budget, we just used the built-in webcam. And it was so-so, but it wasn't the best, but it was adequate for the room because, and then what we did is we just sat the notebook in the middle of it was a big boardroom table that sat about 15 people around the table. And we sat the notebook in the middle of the table, pointed towards the lectern. And the camera caught maybe the front half of the room and the person speaking. So on a cheap budget, it worked. No Zoom option. One notebook that we used, the camera, if it heard something over here, would jump from the speaker to, over there. My notebook worked fine. Notebook webcams, probably not the best option. If you have to, you have to. Would an iPhone camera be okay? If you have some way to reliably connect the iPhone camera to your computer, possibly. To run Zoom from your iPhone, I would strongly not recommend that. We'll talk about the projector later. Right now, we're talking about the camera side. I'm going to suggest there's a few options, and I'm going to share my screen here. Moment for a minute. One of my clients uses this. It's $300, but it's a really good camera. It has USB out, so it will connect directly to the computer without any additional equipment. Good picture, and it's got Zoom on it. You can actually zoom. USB plugs directly into the computer, and you can then have Zoom use that camera. then what I would do is I would take that camera or something similar, put it on a tripod at the back of the room. Now, when it's just general conversation and something general, you can give a wider shot of everybody in the room so the remote people can see everybody in the room. But when there's a speaker, like somebody giving a speech, you could zoom in just on the lectern. So you want to make sure in your placement, you have line of sight to the lectern and zoom in on the lectern and get just the speaker for the speeches. And maybe the table topics, maybe not. That's your call. And then at some point you can zoom back out to catch the whole room. Another option, if somebody has an old camcorder with HDMI out that they want to donate, they're not using it anymore, you can get one of these. HDMI from the camera would plug in here, and then that would plug into the USB on your computer, and then your camcorder becomes your camera. That's a $90 interface that lets you connect a camcorder to your computer. A DSLR wouldn't work. And the reason I have not seen yet a DSLR that has a clean HDMI out. It has all the battery and all the settings and all the stuff you see on the screen. It has that on the output of the HDMI. Most camcorders, you can do what I call a clean HDMI out. So it's just a picture only without all the other information you see on the screen. That's another option. And for my corporate stuff, I have professional cameras that I use with an interface similar to this to go into the computer. But one of my clients has one of these and it works very well for them. Yeah, and DSLR, there's a lot of issues with the DSLR. Nice cameras, but for live work, they're not. I haven't found one yet that works well for live. So key points with your camera, you want something that's reasonably good quality. You want something that has line of sight to the lectern. If somebody's speaking, you don't want, here's your speaker and somebody's head in front of them. You want to have line of sight to the speaker so that the people who are remote have a good view of the speaker. And nice optional is if you can go wide to get the room for the rest of the meeting. And you can do whatever you want. I'm making recommendations from what I've seen, but every club, might see, different clubs might see things differently. And make sure you include a tripod with the camera. You need something to sit it on. But whatever you have for a camera, that's the visual for your remote people. So that's why you want a reasonably good camera. Questions, comments on the camera aspect? Okay, so we've got a computer, or we've got good Ethernet, good internet, we've got a computer, we've got a camera. Next thing we need is a microphone for the room. Now, your computer has a microphone in it. If you bought that camera the Zoom camera that I just showed you, that has a microphone in it. Two problems there. Your computer microphone. If your computer is in the middle of the room or at the back of the room, that microphone is meant for somebody sitting right in front of the computer. It's not meant to pick up a speaker that's 5 feet, 10 feet away. Quality of them is often questionable too. If you use that Zoom camera, it's actually got a pretty good mic in it. But the problem is that Zoom camera is probably going to be halfway or towards the back end of the room, now it's going to have to be sensitive enough to pick up the speaker 15, 20 feet away or more, depending on the room layout. And so because it's now sensitive enough to get somebody that far away, it's also going to pick up all the room noise. People typing on their keyboards, people setting down their coffee cup, people shuffling papers. So all that room noise now is going to be picked up and sent to the remote users. Okay. Oh, thank you for sharing that. Okay. Basic 101 for camera. What I would strongly recommend is that you have a separate microphone that you place up by the lectern. Now it'll have good, clear pickup of the speaker at the lectern. Nice, clear sound. And if somebody in the room is speaking, it will pick them up, but not as strong. And again, this depends on the mic. But you don't have to have it as sensitive, so it's not picking up all that background noise. You'll have much better quality sound. Now, you can spend hundreds of dollars on microphones, but for this purpose, and I've actually have one of these. Yeah, I've got that one. So it's a $100 microphone. Sit that on the desk in front of the lectern. And that'll give you really good pickup of the speaker. Another one that I've used is a Blue Snowball. And these came from Canada Computers. I'll send you links. $70. And then depending on where your computer is, you might need a USB extension to extend it that extra distance so you can plug it into the computer. These are USB microphones. They work really well. I've also used these in boardrooms, just putting it in the middle of the boardroom table to catch everybody in the room. But if you don't have a good mic, the remote people are just going to hear lots of background noise. They're not going to hear the speaker clearly. It's not going to be a good experience for them. So even more important than the video is the quality of the audio. And that's where a proper mic up by the lectern will give you the best quality video or audio of the speaker. Now, the drawback is you have to remember now, anybody giving reports, anybody who's speaking needs to be up at the lectern or pretty close to that microphone, or have a very strong voice and be speaking in the direction of the microphone. So that's an adjustment now for the people in the room. They have to get used to that. Comments, questions on microphones? And I'm just giving you examples. There's thousands of different models of cameras and microphones and everything. I'm just giving you some examples of what to look for and what I've had some experience with. But there's lots of good stuff out there. I must be covering all your questions.
Bruce, question. Why do you call this type of a microphone USB microphone?
Because it plugs directly into the computer.
Also, it has a
Into the USB
USB
port.
and a cable that plugs into your laptop.
Yes.
And
So for example, in my studio here, I'm using a professional microphone that's not USB, but I can't plug this microphone into a computer. it has to go into a sound console, which in turn plugs into the computer.
Bruce, have you had any luck with using a separate speaker to amplify the speakers within the room and then have the laptop pick that up?
Yeah, that you could try it. I doubt it would be that good. If the room that you're in has a sound system, by all means use it, but depending on where your laptop is and the microphone in the laptop, I doubt that the pickup would be that good. The only way, every instance is different, the only way is to try it. And now, if your laptop is in the middle of the room or the back of the room, you're still picking up all the extra noise in the room. The coffee cups, the paper shuffling, the keyboard typing and that. So you could try it. The odds of that working well and giving good quality sound would be slim, but it's worth a try.
Okay, thank you.
Multi-mic setups that would work. I wasn't going to get into that in corporate setups where, you know, they have thousands of dollars and they can pay me to bring in a team of people. What I would do in a multi-mic setup is I would use microphones around the room, but they would have to go into a sound console, and you need somebody to run that. And then that would feed the Zoom session. So it is doable, but there's a lot of additional work and a lot of additional cost around that. Depending on how many mics you want, you've got the cost of every individual mic at probably $100 a piece or up. You've got cabling, you've got a sound console. You can spend a couple of $100s on that, up to thousands of dollars. So a multi-mic setup, if you have somebody with the technical skills, you know, a multi-mic setup might be something that where you have a room mic to pick up everybody in the room and a mic at the podium for the speaker. That type of a multi-mic setup. But it needs somebody now dedicated just to or somebody to run the audio, and it does need an audio console or an audio mixer for that to work. So that's getting a bit beyond the scope and probably beyond the budget of most clubs, unless you've got a rich member who wants to donate this stuff. But yeah, it's definitely an option. So we've got our good internet, we've got our computer. The remote users can see us well because we've got a good camera that's got a good shot of the speaker. They can hear well now because we've got a good mic in front of the speaker. Lapel mic. The trouble with the lapel mic in a Toastmasters setting now is you've got to take that mic off, scratch, 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 noise, noise, and give it to the next person. And they've got to put it on. If they don't put it on right, you're not getting good sound now. So in a Toastmasters meeting, you could use a lapel mic. It would be a lot of extra hassle and a lot more room for error because now everybody's touching the mic and transferring it. So the time wasted transferring it over. So I would discourage that in a Toastmasters meeting. Next, you want to be able to see the remote people. Oh, okay, back to lapel mic just for a second. What brand would you suggest? I'm more familiar with the professional brands. I have the higher end version of a Line 6 lapel mic. Line 6 is a brand. Shure, Sennheiser, those are some good brands. I'm not sure who makes USB lapel mics though. The ones that I know of are all audio, have the audio output that goes into a sound console. Okay. You need to be able to see the people that are remote. The people in the room, okay, so we've taken care of the remote users. Now you need to be able to take care of the people in the room, seeing those who are remote. Let's suppose a remote user is giving a speech, or is one of the evaluators and giving an evaluation. The people in the room need to be able to see them. So what you need is a projector or a large screen TV. And that was not included in my $1,000 budget. So I'm working on the assumption that the venue already has one. When I was with Toast Your Health, the room we were in had a projector. It was a boardroom. My current club, Brooklyn Toastmasters, they meet at a community center. There's a projector in the room that we have the use of. So if your room has a projector and you're able to use it and connect it to the notebook, that's great. If not, or if they have a large screen TV, a 40-inch or a 60-inch TV, depending on how many people are in the room. Because the people in the room need to be able to see that projector screen or that TV with the images of your remote users. And then what I would do is, if they're just there watching, I would go to the grid view. So you just see everybody who's there. And if one of my remote users was a speaker, I would go to speaker view so that they're now big on the screen and everybody can see just them. So again, your tech person would have to be ready to go between grid view and speaker view. But you need some way for the people in the room to be able to see the remote users. So if your club isn't in a venue with this projector or a TV on the wall, consider changing venues or ask them what options they have. Do they have another room? Do they have one that can be included for a bit of extra cost? What can they do? But if the people in the room can't see the remote users, especially if they're giving a speech, then the model's not going to work that well. They're going to hear a speech and just sit there looking at the wall. They've got to be able to see. So you need to account for that in your plan. And that projector screen needs to be at the front of the room or the TV, or just off to the side slightly. It has to be somewhere in the room where it's visible to everybody in the room. Now, when I was at Toast Your Health, the projector screen was right behind the podium because it was a narrow, long boardroom. See a problem with that? Now, all the remote people are in behind your speaker. And you see the cats and the kids and the dog and all that stuff going on, and that's distracting to the speaker. So what we would do is we would leave the projector on most of the meeting, but during the formal speeches, most projectors have a picture mute or a blackout button. So we would put the projector in blackout during the formal speeches, so you didn't have that distraction in behind the speakers. And then for the rest of the meeting, we would turn it back on. Moving it to the side wasn't an option. But ideally, having your screen to the side of the podium is ideal. You might have to work, it depends on the venue. The venue we're in now, we can't move the projector screen, but we can move the podium to the side of it. But key points, you want everybody to be able to see the remote users. But if it's behind the podium, you want to be able to turn the picture off so that it's not distracting when you have formal speeches. So I can tell you my experience. I can give you some of the best practices, but you now have to take this and figure out, okay, what's going to work in my situation? You thought you were going to get all the answers? Not necessarily, but you're going to get the things that you have to think through. And finally, last piece of equipment, some type of a speaker so that you can hear the remote users. The people in the room can hear the remote users. You want remote users to be able to give speeches. You want the remote users to be able to give grammarian reports and evaluations. You want to include them in the meeting as much as possible. But the people in the room need to be able to hear them. Most notebook speakers are not loud. I haven't come across one yet that's loud enough. Notebook speakers are about that big, and they're meant for somebody sitting a foot, 2 feet in front of the computer. They're not meant to fill the room with sound. So you need some type of an external speaker. If there's a sound system in the room, maybe you can connect your notebook to that. If the room will permit you, or if you can do that and have somebody that's technical enough to do that for you. The other option is to buy an external speaker, and one that I've used, I've got a couple of them, is bar keeps jumping down over top. This one here, it's only about 3 inches high. It's got an AC adapter, so it's a powered speaker. It's only $25. And that, if there's not a lot of background noise, is loud enough for a room of 15 to 20 people. It does need use external power. It plugs into an 1/8 inch jack. There's lots of different computer speakers out there, but you want to get some type of external speaker that's going to be loud enough for everybody in the room to hear those who are remote. A Bluetooth speaker, sure. As long as it's powerful enough and loud enough that you get good, decent sound through the room. There's lots of speakers out there, Bluetooth, USB speakers, audio speakers that use the little round audio jack, the headphone jack. Lots of different ones out there, but get something suitable for the room and test it. Buy all that and you have the equipment you need. Connect it all together and away you go. Almost. Placement of that speaker, if I'm using this one, I would put the mic up by the podium and I would put the speaker in the middle of the room. You don't want the speaker right or close to the mic. Oh, TI even sells a speaker. Maybe the district will buy some cheap. Somebody was asking about the district. Yeah. You don't want the speaker too close to the mic, or if it's a directional speaker, you don't want it pointing at the mic or you get that awful squeal that we call feedback. So what do we need? We need good internet. We need a computer, a camera, a room mic, a projector or large screen TV, and a speaker. That's the equipment you need. I've given you a few examples. There's thousands out there. Thoughts, comments on the equipment? Thank you, Anton. Oh, there's a link to the speaker. You guys are very quiet for Toastmasters. Or I'm covering all your questions, or your head's spinning too much right now. trying to take it all in. But if you're taking notes, I think you'll find this helpful to avoid the pitfalls, the traps that people fall into, the mistakes that end up costing money or making it ineffective and you abandon it. So what are some of the other things now that we have to consider? You've got all the equipment. You've got a techie guy that knows how to hook all this stuff up. Some of the other things that you need to consider in order to pull this off successfully. If you're using my suggestion of a mic by the podium, you need to train the people in the room that anybody who is speaking or presenting needs to step up to the lectern. And in a Toastmasters meeting, that is the best practice anyways. So hopefully that isn't too much of a change for people. You need to consider, how are you going to communicate with remote users? How are they going to get the Zoom link each week or the link to use? What if the internet's not working that week and you have to say, oops, no remote users, internet down, or technology issue, the computer crashed. Say a few unkind words about Bill Gates and then say, you have to get a hold of those remote users. So how are you going to handle communication? A WhatsApp group, a text message, an email? So good communication with your remote users is important and timely when there's issues. Some of the logistical things, voting for the Table Topics Award. How are you going to have your remote users vote for the Table Topics Award? A simple option there is in the chat, put the phone number of the Table Topics presenter and say, here, text your vote to this person. Or private chat. Yeah. Zoom polls, yeah, could do that privately, but then you'd have to aggregate that with the people in the room. But yeah, you could do a Zoom poll. But that's a decision that has to be made and communicated. How is your club going to handle role assignments? My suggestion is, and what worked well where I did it with Toast Your Health, is all roles could either be remote or in person, with the exception of the Toastmaster and the timer. Maybe you want to start that way. Maybe you want to start more restrictive, and as people get used to it, open up. Maybe you want to let your Toastmaster be remote, but that would be a bit harder. But it could be done. If you want a remote timer, how are you going to make it so the speakers in the room can see that timer all the time? These are issues to think through. But once you come up with how you're going to deal with it, that's what makes it effective. So you've got your techie guy that puts all this together every week, and then he leaves the club. Or he decides he wants to go on vacation and goes off on vacation for a month. What are you going to do now? Say, well, we're a hybrid club, but not for this month. That's not a good answer. So you need to be training people. You need to have multiple people immediately, and you need ongoing training, just like in all the other roles. You don't have one person trained in a role, you have many other people trained, and you're always training new people in that role. Suzette, it actually goes till 9 o'clock, so we're actually well ahead of time. I do have a bit more to cover, and then I would open it up for questions after that. So how do you want to handle the role assignments? Training. Test in advance. Test it in advance. You don't want to be doing your first hybrid meeting and trying to figure out unpackaging the camera and the mic and trying to figure out how all this goes together. Rent the room for a Saturday. Get your tech guy and a couple of other people in the room. Then get 1 or 2 people at home as remote users and actually do a dry run. Walk through all of the tech. Do a quick walk through the meeting, you know, a 2-minute speech, 1 or 2 table topics. Test, test, test. And for the remote users, is my camera angle good? Can you hear well? Is my mic placement good? When the remote users speak, can you hear them at all the points in the room? Can you see the remote people from all the points in the room? You need to shift things around and try again. Test, test, test. Tech-savvy women. Yes, I work in technology for many years. I know many tech-savvy women. So I'm using guy as a generic term. My apologies if it wasn't taken that way. Especially in the early stages of implementing this, review each week. Talk to your remote users. What worked well? What didn't? Review, review, fine-tune, review, fine-tune. Just because you're in the meeting, don't assume that the experience was as good for the remote users. Ask them, as a remote user, what worked well this week? What didn't? What can we do to make it better? As time goes on, you won't have to do that as often, but in the early stages, you want to be doing that every week for the first couple of months until you get things down to a good system that works really well and has the best experience for the in-person and the remote people. And finally, after all this is done, your first meeting was a success because you followed best practices, you did all your testing, it was perfect, everybody loved it so much. And now you've got all this equipment. What are you going to do with it? So, storage and security of the equipment. This is some expensive stuff. If you're in a community center or a corporate setting, where is this equipment going to be stored? Is it going to be secure? If somebody's going to take it home, what if they're not here next week? The logistical things of who's responsible for the equipment and how is it going to get to the meeting? Or if it stays at the venue, how is it going to be secured? Logistical, but all very important stuff. So how does that make you feel? That was what I had wanted to cover this evening. Are you saying, wow, my head hurts now? Are you saying, you gave me some good stuff to make some decisions, how we're going to move forward? Excited, feel great, good. When some of you guys go hybrid, invite me, send me an invite, and I'd love to come see how your meeting is. You make it seem doable. It is definitely doable, but you got to have a plan. The floor is open for questions, comments. We still have lots of time. I'd rather book too much time than not enough. Unmute, use the comments, use the chat. Appreciate your comments, your feedback.
Yeah, I've heard of one club going hybrid And a lot of people took their own laptop into the room as well. So initially they did have quite a bit of an issue with feedback from all of the different computers, I guess, with their mic. What would you suggest for something like that?
If you've got 2 or more laptops in the same room, in the same Zoom session, that's a recipe for disaster. Not just at a Toastmasters meeting.
Yeah.
Only one person should have the only way that can work is if everybody mutes their microphone and mutes their speaker or uses headphones. And the only person who should have their speaker on is the person whose microphone is unmuted. Zoom has some very sophisticated feedback or echo cancellation built into it. Normally, to have a speaker and a microphone that close together in the same room, you will have feedback, no ifs, ands, or buts. But Zoom is fairly sophisticated in filtering that out and working with that from an audio standpoint. But as soon as you get 2 computers, it filters out the speaker and microphone on that computer, but not from the one beside it. And that's where the disaster comes in. Have everybody use headphones. And only one person should unmute their microphone at a time.
Okay, thank you.
For those who have to leave, you're welcome to leave. For anybody else, the floor is open. I'll stay on as long as people have questions or comments. But with that, that is the end of my presentation. But I'm here to work with you guys and help you with whatever questions you have. In the material I send out, I don't have a PowerPoint as you saw, but I'll send an outline of my notes and the links that I showed you. I'll also include my email there. You are welcome to email me if you have any questions, comments. I would respond usually within a couple of days. So I'd be happy to help out, or if you want me to, I'd be happy to attend your first meeting if you want me to give any feedback or comment on it. I just want to see clubs succeed in this area as part of my role. I'm also the tech director for District 123. So anything I can do to help your club succeed with this, I am here for you to help you with that. Iona?
Thank you, Bruce, for a wonderful presentation. You've covered most of the points. I can tell you from personal experience, I didn't have the right equipment, so it wouldn't pick up, and we didn't have the bandwidth, and we were in a library. This was when the pandemic had first started. So we had a challenge. And now I know that you must have the right equipment, and we've got to be so cognizant about the feedback and how the speakers to carry this out. But it's been a very wonderful presentation. I would like to thank you for your time. Thank you for being such a warm, genuine, and sincere instructor. All of us today learned something from you. This will also be posted on the district YouTube channel for those of you who've missed it or need to recap, along with your notes if you would like to share them. And thank you everyone for joining us. I don't know if there are any more questions, but the floor is yours, and we will remain open for the next 5 minutes if anyone wants to say anything.
You've been a good group, very quiet, but you've been a good group. So thank you.
Bruce, have you ever had any problem with, especially after us all being remote for the last year and a half, that people don't want to go drive to the meeting, like they're going to stay remote, even if we do go hybrid?
I know that my club executive, I don't know any clubs that have returned to in person yet. I'm sure some have. I'm not aware of any. But I know my club executive is planning on going hybrid. The rent money that they saved over the last year, they've set aside for the equipment that's needed. The plan is to go hybrid. I believe a number of members will be returning, but a number still want to remain remote. We've got a mix, but that's where you have to poll your members and see what the preference is there. You know, it's a club, and you need to see what will best meet the needs of your club members.
Well, I guess that's all the questions for tonight. So I would like to say thank you very much, Bruce. Bruce, if you would like to place your email in chat so that they can contact you as well, that would be helpful. If everyone would like to give a big round of applause to Bruce, because this is an excellent presentation. Thank you so very much.
Okay, there's my email.
Thank you, everyone, and good night. You've got Bruce's email. If you don't, please look it up under contacts under the district website. Bruce is our tech chair for the district and easily contactable. And as you've seen, very open to a lot of suggestions. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Stay well and stay safe.